So I think two groups left. The Transmedia group. If that was the group in the back, I'm sorry, maybe I misunderstood. Yes. Yeah, okay, great. I wasn't wrong about the name.
You want to do this? Yeah. Yes, I'm doing it. Okay. So we've written it up right here. And what we've called it is Transmedia Knowledge Transfer with Push and Pull. By the pull, we mean questions coming in via text message and SMS, voice, like phone calls. And the push is going out by radio, could also include a television if there was enough capacity out there. So we give you an example. We would have urgent questions, let's say in a post-conflict area where the people were trying to get back into farming and they needed knowledge. So there could be questions, and then they would come in by various methods into the local radio, and then it would go. You would have some experts or an expert answer questions, as well as having feedback from the people who had answers themselves of what could be done. Then this would then be going out over the radio, could go over for the interested parties that are connected by the internet. They could come out by web radio, and put this whole thing together. Any questions?
How close are we to being able to build something like that? Is it just combining existing tools, or is there a lot of new?
Just combining existing tools. And imagine that in places some people do it. I mean, you have call-in radios, but you could make it, far more integrated, where you could have. I'm just thinking out loud right now, but you could provide an open source application that a local radio could use that would manage all this information, and they could host their own shows, create them, and a lot of the data would be managed by a bit of software running at the local radio, receiving SMS and voice and messaging.
And that bit of software is called Asterix, which is the open source
voice.
Oh, it is.
So it's out there, yeah.
Yeah, it's an open source voice and SMS gateway.
Yeah.
In fact, Seth has, I think, put one in the B, which is upstairs.
Yeah.
But it's basically the phone goes in the front and the internet goes out the back.
Yeah.
And it lets you manage those kinds of assets. That's really interesting. Yeah.
So in the kind of, you've got the internet, which is super easy to use for collecting information, and anyone can give information. And solely internet sites incentivize you to do that by making you a more popular user or by listing how many people pay attention to you. And then you've got the radio, which people are used to tuning into when it's the thing that interests them, right? Now, so we were thinking of taking both of those aspects and applying them to the other end of the chain. So right now, there's a disincentive to text message a lot. It costs you something, and it's not recording that you're a really useful contributor. So if, for instance, I'm calling in to say I've got this farming technique, I want to add a contribution, maybe you can let me call in and ask a couple questions for free, right? Or you can, there are different ways to incentivize it. You can also say that my texting account becomes a different quality, or my user account gets linked to my piece of information. Maybe it's recognized on local radio, what have you. And on the other side, you've got all this content that starts aggregating in whatever database you have. You can make it so that unless there's special requests, you just have a kind of generic schedule for the output of this information. Monday mornings, it's about science. Tuesday afternoons, it's about math, right? So that people know, if I only get to use this radio for like my batteries on the day my football team plays and then 2 other hours, I know it's going to be this afternoon because that's when it pertains to whatever my career is. So those are two other ideas.
Great, thank you.
As these radio programs happen, you would fill up a knowledge base so that people could come in later with the internet and just search on questions and see what the answers were and stuff. And one last thought is that these things could be integrated with introduction of useful tools. There's, example is there's a website called Design for the Other 90%, pictorial designs on how to build things that people would be introduced to that they wouldn't hear about otherwise just by answering questions.
Right. Great. Thank you very much. Okay, we've got one more group which was in front, and I've forgotten the theme of that group. I'm sorry, yes. So, yeah, I'm sorry, let me give you this one. You got one? Great.
So the topic of our conversation originally was communication or participation in repressive environments, but what we wanted to do actually was broaden that a little bit to talk about challenging environments, because we identified some of the issues could include things like being an HIV positive person in a family that doesn't know your status and needing to get sort of updates about your antiretroviral drugs. That could be considered a challenging environment. But there are also challenging environments in the more traditional sense, like being an activist in a repressive sort of regime. So we wanted to really sort of span those two issues. And we looked at sort of really, as we mentioned, intense activists, but also general citizens who might not know sort of the risks that they put themselves in when they participate or communicate. And we talked about sort of a variety of different solutions, and just like Skylar's group, we spent a lot of time getting to the idea of what we actually wanted to address. And so some of the things that we came up with were the things that sort of exist already, which is improving modes of communication between tech practitioners, activists, and sort of social engineering activists, and bringing them together in communication groups or brainstorming sessions so that that knowledge could be shared and sort of better ideas could come out of that, because we realized that a lot of this information actually exists. It just needs to be integrated in a more sort of cohesive format. And so that was the thing that could be done really quite quickly. And then one of the other things we came up with that would be sort of more of a long-term goal was this idea of a one-button alert, where perhaps you have a mobile phone and something happens to you, whatever that sort of incident might be, where you press a button to send an SMS, or you hit a auto dial that sends a missed call to a system that recognizes that you're sort of in trouble or in danger, and it sends all of your information, your metadata, your last GPS location, perhaps a description, your height, your weight, that sort of thing, to a distribution list that you've pre-selected. So if there were something wrong, or if you were to go missing, if all of a sudden you were to encounter some sort of problem, there would be an immediate alert to all of your most trusted individuals to recognize that that issue had arisen, but also where you were last seen. And I think that could be sort of modified to include other information as well. And then the final thing that we talked about is something that I'm from UNICEF, and we've been talking about this now at UNICEF for a little while, which is this idea of educating your average citizen about risk and coming up with some sort of interactive registration process when people go to use a service, whether it's a web-based service or a mobile-based service that comes up, that has like maybe 3 to 5 slides that are interactive. You answer yes, no to a question. The idea would be that they're low literacy, so primarily image-based. And whenever you answer the question, it either sort of rewards you for selecting the answer that it intended you to choose, or redirects you to a bit of educational information. So should you share your location on a website that is like communicating with other people? Maybe not. Should you share your age? Maybe not. That sort of information. And then the idea would be that this would be replicable for the internet, also for MMS, and Bluetooth, so that young people could pass it around and it wouldn't necessarily need to go through sort of mobile stations or through the service itself. And I think that was kind of it, unless anybody from my group can think of anything else. Yeah?
Cool.
All right, thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you all.